Let me show you some of the progress I've made on the controls on the Project 700 project. Let's start with the steering. As you know, we've got a rack and pinion unit controlling the front. It's been mounted and modified to fit the car. From there, we have quite a little bit of of angle going on with the steering shafts, as you can see here. I'm trying to get down so you can see there's the steering rack coming up. You can see the first knuckle, the next knuckle, and then the steering column and the steering wheel. You can see it really is going through some somewhat angled turns. It was angled enough where I couldn't use a standard universal knuckle joint. These are double knuckled joints, as you can see here. There's a joint right here and a joint down here, and those are built for situations like this where you've got more angle than a typical steering column would have, steering shaft. Goes up through two bearings, 3/4 inch D shaft, into another double knuckle right there. Very close tolerances to the brake unit. So it took some doing to make those two things work together. And then it comes into the steering shaft. I fabricated this, taking a bearing and welding it in this end, welding another bearing, or the attachment points on this end, using a 3/4 inch shaft to run through that. And then there is a quick disconnect for the steering wheel, and that helps you get in and out. So here's the shifter and the emergency brake over on this side. You can see right here, you activate it simply by knocking it down, and it's a good solid emergency brake. Cable is just the same cable that came on the donor. I didn't lengthen it. All I did is remount the lever. And then the shifter I did fabricate. It is basically a lever. Of course, it's a sequential transmission, 5-speed with reverse. And I ended up with a single cable here. It's an automotive shift cable. I started off with two bicycle cable push-pull arrangement, and it just didn't work very well. So actually at the suggestion of someone on the forum, I changed over to this automotive style shift cable, and that worked much, much better. You can see it goes back, it's mounted down in here, and it runs back to the other side. And then the shift cable comes out on the left side. Bracket was welded in here. Different bracket was made for the shift lever, and it connects in, and it works quite well. Very simple, very easy. So there is a reverse lockout, so you don't accidentally shift into it, and that's what this is. This is the, you just twist it to allow you to go into reverse. You basically shift from neutral down into first, and it's a gear beyond first. Again, this is the stock override switch that came on the donor and the stock cable, so there were no modifications here needed, just needed to mount it. Both the throttle and the clutch are cable operated on the donor, so I kept that cable operated system there, but of course I needed much longer cables. I was able to find some really long universal use motorcycle cables with the proper endings that I could string up front. So, for example, on the clutch pedal, you can see here I've got it actually going right to the clutch pedal, and then there is a stop up that I fabricated for the cable. I think you can see it there in the background. You can also see 3 holes here in the clutch pedal itself. And this is where I was working on trying to find what was the right amount of leverage should I use on this. I went both high and low, ended up in the middle one there, as you can see. And it has, as you might expect, a fairly light clutch pedal pressure that you need, but it uses the entire length of the cable movement, so you have good feel on the pedal. Since I retrofitted the clutch pedal to use a cable, I needed some way to put some stops in it that would normally be in a hydraulic system or a levered push-pull system for a clutch. So that's what this is about. Over here you can see I've got a spring, and it's the shaft that runs inside along with a little nut on the end here. And what that does is that provides a little stop. So the clutch stops there, gives you a nice solid stop. Otherwise it would swing kind of freely because all it had was the cable to hold it. So that gives it a very solid automotive style feel. In addition, the throttle cable is right here. I did use a hot rod style pedal, but it does fairly well match the pedal set I've got for the clutch and brake. I'm going to take some Scotch pads and knock down the shine a little bit so that it doesn't look quite so shiny. Paint the back black so it'll match in the end. As you can see, and that works out real well. I've got actually good range of motion there. So it's not like an on-off switch. You got good throttle control there and good movement. It's about the same amount of movement that you would have in your normal car. The braking system is also complete. You can see here my brake assembly. It's a Wilwood unit with Wilwood master cylinders and a Wilwood proportional valve. It's a good lightweight unit. Of course, very strong. It's used in a lot of custom cars. This particular unit has the master cylinders mounted at the top and facing back towards the driver. The reason I went with this style was I wanted to leave the space in front of the pedal assembly free because I want to have a trunk. And by doing that, that puts all the workings back towards the driver and leaves more space open in the trunk. You see the lines are going down. We've got basically your front lines and your rear lines. Going down to a front here, we've got, of course, 2 front brakes on this and 1 rear brake. Lines are run down along the frame, and it's still difficult to see here, but right here there is a union where there is a brake switch, and it goes right on to the rear brakes. Fortunately, all the brake fittings are the same as automotive, so no special fittings were needed other than what you find in a typical hot rod shop. And here you can see the brake line coming over on the right side of the vehicle, running along the frame and up to a flex connection and back to the rear brake. It is just 1 brake in the rear because it is a live axle. There's also a second cable there, and that is for the emergency brake. That's was great about using this unit, this donor. It came with an emergency brake, so I didn't need to engineer anything there. Here's a front view of the brake and pedal assembly. Brakes work great, no problem locking up the wheels when I apply pressure. In fact, I've got it set now so it takes just moderate pressure. You don't really have to slam the brakes on in order for the brakes to lock up. I did start out with 5/8 inch bore master cylinders, and it just wasn't quite enough line pressure to the brakes. So I swapped them both out for 1/2 inch bore master cylinders, and that seems to work pretty well. Good pedal feel and plenty of braking power.